this one is a trade-off. The special adjustments budget. Take into account what Mr. Fani Jutoy is saying, right? So we can, Fani, you're right. You qualifying it and giving it more nuance. Personally, I'm not actually opposed to what you're saying, but we need to sort of balance what you're saying and what I'm saying, and I'm sure Esther and I will sort that out, and no doubt you can add and amend it if you want. Then we go on to observing that the Minister of Finance, in terms of the requirements, has actually asked for the following. Now, those are the technical issues that flow from the policy issues, right? But 4.64 stresses the point that National Treasury reported to the committee that amendments to clauses 7, 8, and 9 dealt only with the extension of the relief measures dealing with streamlined tax dispensation for funds. That's on the bottom of page 6, colleagues, if you're finding it. For funds established to assist with COVID-19 relief efforts by 2 months from 4 to 6. These funds would have qualified for tax exemptions in terms of the current provisions of the Income Tax Act. National Treasury indicated an extension of this relief is tax neutral and does not result in an additional direct cost to government. Then finally, the committee was satisfied that the extension by 2 months of the relief provided for in clauses 7 to 9 of the bill would not adversely affect the fiscal framework and the composition of tax revenues, but would provide much needed relief as the country is still under COVID-19 lockdown measures. Colleagues, I can't see anything controversial, but maybe somebody has issues. So it's over to you, colleagues. Nope. Remember, you can always come back when you read the report, and maybe you get more time to look at this and so on. So having said that, I want to go to the next report, colleagues, then we will look at the bills. So we'll now deal with the administration report, and that is 5 pages. Obviously, on page 1, we know all the introduction and background. It was covered last week, and we covered it before. Public participation is the same thing. People obviously make submissions on both bills. And then we go to the key issues raised during the submissions. That's the more important thing. This is a public hearing, right? So 4.1, and this, colleagues, on page 4, 4.1, it says the key issues that were raised. And the reason I keep looking at my computer, cell phone, is because, in case Nkululeko is drawing my attention to any member who's asking anything or wants to speak. I see also, I don't know whether Younger is selling her boss out, but I see WhatsApp has come, to be fair to him, from Momo, saying that he absolutely doesn't trust Younger and Chris, and anything they say is not to be believed at all and doesn't represent the Treasury point of view. So I shall send you a reply, Younger and Chris, to say, obviously I know. So that's a facetious remark. Obviously he's saying that, he regrets that he can't be here. He's stuck with the minister. Well, not stuck. He says he's with the minister, but he will join as soon as I'm done, he says, in about 30 minutes. So we acknowledge that. But we don't actually need him, with due respect. I mean, National Treasury is very competent here, but I think he feels as the DG responsible. He doesn't trust the chair in particular, and Eti, and what might they do behind his back. So maybe that's why he is seeking to be here. But, that's Momo, he's always around. Okay, so 4.1, colleagues. The key issues that were raised on the administration bill were the definition of a qualifying taxpayer, of course, the deferral of payment employees' tax liability for small to medium-sized enterprises, and the extension of the time period. So on the definition of a qualifying taxpayer, which is to be found in clause 1. Now, this is what was the submission received on that larger businesses with a turnover, we discussed this last week as well, I think Fani raised this, larger businesses with a current, and I think Mr. Ryder, larger businesses with a turnover more than 100 million benefit from the relief as well. The committee have appreciated that the COVID-19 relief was mainly directed at assisting small to medium enterprises with an annual turnover of 100 million rands or less, excluding VAT. SARS assured the committee that larger businesses were not per se excluded, as they could still apply for a case-by-case relief where the circumstances can be properly considered by SARS. Most of the issues on this definition were dealt with during the initial consultation by national treasuries and SARS on the initial and revised bills published in April and May. So, you'll know that the initial bill, they gazette, and then they engage with stakeholders, and then they change it and bring it to us. And that's when we finalize the bill, as we're currently doing. So that was taken into account, and SARS has indicated itself how it feels, and that these things were dealt with, right? So on this one, colleagues, any questions? Definition of a qualifying taxpayer? Nobody wants to raise anything. I think some of these issues might have emerged last week. I can't recall exactly. Excuse me. Excuse me. So that's done. Then the next issue is a deferral. Sorry, we're a deferral of payment of employees' tax liability for small to medium businesses. Who's that? Who's got a question? Was that Dikeleni? Excuse me. Maybe somebody accidentally came on the audio. Now, we've covered this. The submissions were received and the extension of this deferral was granted, right? Now, the amendments that the committee made, so the minister again wrote in terms of the Money Bills Act, probably familiar with the process, and 4.42, the amendments offered are allowing tax compliant small to medium-sized businesses defer payment of 35% of employees' tax that they have deducted from employees. The repayments now only begin in October and run through until March 2021. I think this makes perfect sense, colleagues. Is this controversial at all? Nope. Then the rest were technical cross-referencing, and the conclusion, the committee noted that it was assured by National Treasury that many other measures would be covered in the ordinary tax administration amendment laws to be processed by Parliament with MTBPS later in the year. So obviously, colleagues, just to remind ourselves, these are specifically related to the COVID-19 challenges. The normal 3 tax bills are processed according to the requirements and related, as you know, to the October MTBPS. Now, a lot of criticism occurred over these bills, and Treasury's reply, for what it's worth, is this, in a way, to use my term, colleagues, I'm not saying they will use it, Younger can speak for herself and Chris, but they're saying this is a transitional thing, and that the fuller picture, in terms of the budget over the MTEF cycle and the tax bills that will emerge next February, become clearer with the MTBPS. So there's a way in which the Minister and Treasury was suggesting to us that, you don't have the fuller picture. And I think the underlying subtext, if you like, is we ourselves don't have the fuller picture because nobody can predict where COVID-19 is going to go. Not the world's greatest scientists and economists and whoever else. So I think the idea here is, if need be, we will adjust things. And as we get closer to October, we'll negotiate in the different departments and the MINCOM buds and all that. And we'll be able to deal with some of the weaknesses in the current special adjustments budget, but also we'll take into account events subsequent to the special adjustments budget and the 2 tax bills that go with it. So mercifully, colleagues, the peak that was predicted by our scientists hasn't materialized. And though a surge is likely, it's reasonable to think that the scientists may now be right in suggesting that possibly the surge too won't be as severe as was anticipated. And we hope so for all sorts of reasons, not least that, there's no money in the coffers, let alone, the problems about creating growth and jobs. So colleagues, I'm not surprised that there hasn't been vigorous debate here because of the nature of these bills. They're contingent. Uh, you know, many of the issues, National Treasury, I must say, you dealt with through negotiations with the stakeholders. The criticisms will prevail from COSATU and others in NGOs that the budget doesn't go far enough and it's retrograde in some respects. But hey, you must accept that that's their right to speak, you know, and some of us agree with some at least of what they say, and others of us don't agree at all, and others of us agree with everything. So that's how democracy works, Treasury, as you know. So colleagues, shall we then go to, having considered their two reports, to Poppy and Taka's document for us. It's the CCOF overview of the COVID-19 tax bills. Now here, colleagues, she merely summarizes for us what the key issues are, which I think is important, colleagues. You might say, why, Eunice, do you put her under pressure? Poor thing. It's already been covered by Treasury. Yes, but Treasury gives you an executive point of view. We must have the parliamentary researcher give the parliamentary researcher's point of view, stroke the research unit's point of view. She is employed by Parliament. We can't rely on the executive solely. Not that Yanga and Chris and Momo and others don't reflect accurately what they see as having happened and where the changes were made and so on. But, you know, just like us, they have also their prejudices, even officials, unconscious and other. So that is why Poppy has to do it. Now, ideally, I prefer Poppy to take us through this, but my sense in an exchange with her is she prefers not to. And this was the same with Antonia Manamela. So unfortunately, though there's not my job, it's really Nkuleko's job as the committee secretary to do this on behalf of Poppy and Nkuleko. But hey, you know what? Maybe because I'm more familiar with the policy issues here, I can expedite matters by taking us through to Poppy. It's a very nice paper as usual, very neatly done, very nicely written, very clear. I really like the quality of your writing. It's very nicely done. Thank you very much from the research unit. So now, if you look, colleagues, at which I fortunately just read now, you know, about half an hour before, so I'm very familiar with it, colleagues. But I saw a lot of overlap between this and you know, what Treasury told us last week. But Poppy, since you're so shy, what you can do is in the chat group, and Esther as the content advisor, she has a crucial role to play once we get an overview from Poppy. In the chat group, or if Esther wants to put her hand up, maybe she's more confident and she has spoken more on this committee than the researchers seem to do. She can come in and say, you know, there are some discrepancies between what Treasury said last week and what our parliamentary staff are saying. So the first issue then, colleagues, is goes to 3. What are the key tax proposals? The first one, as you know, is expanding the employment tax incentive schemes, age, ability criteria, and the amount claimable. Now, colleagues, I went through this about half an hour ago, and though she adds to what's there in the reports from the NA, if you put that input from the NA and what Yanga and the team spoke to last week, I can't see anything new here. Can anybody pick up anything here that she's saying that they think is something that we haven't in some other form already covered in today's consideration of the NA reports and what we had last week in the NCOP briefing? Anybody got anything to say? Esther? Nkululeko, the staff can come in, you can help us if there's anything, but I can't see anything. Then the second point, you can come in whenever you want, colleagues. And those of you who get a chance to read it tonight, you can still come back tomorrow and say, hey, Chairperson, I found this issue and therefore I want to raise it. No problem. We're not going to plunge into voting. You still have the right to raise anything you want to before we vote formally tomorrow. So then the second part here is providing for special tax dispensation for funds established to assist with COVID-19. The interesting thing she says here is she talks about, if you see the 3 bullet points, the receipts and accruals of the PBO are exempt from income tax. Donations made to or by the PBO are exempt from donations tax, and the donations made to a PBO would also be tax deductible at 10%. So she puts it very clearly as well. Very similar, I think, to what Young Gandham said last week, just reminding you. Then she talks about providing for the skills development levy holiday. It's 1% of the monthly roll, she reminds us, for 4 months, beginning from May to end of August, which has passed us by. Then the increasing deduction available for funds to the Solidarity Fund. She says here this proposal aimed at encouraging more South Africans to contribute towards the Solidarity Fund. In the revised draft bill published by 1st May 2020, it is proposed that the tax deductible limit for donations be increased from 10%, as you know, and this only applies to donations made during the current tax year. Then she takes over with the key tax proposals in the Disaster Management Administration Bill, deals with the deferral of the payment of employees' tax liabilities for tax compliance, small and medium-sized businesses. If anybody's got any issue to raise, please raise your hand and Nkululeko will alert me to it. Or just interject. I mean, you know, it's easier. It's no big deal. The deferral of the payment of provisional tax and interim payments liability, obviously for tax compliance, small and medium-sized business, accounting for donations made to Solidarity Fund. Okay. Making VAT refunds for taxpayers earlier. Now let me read this. Now, making VAT refunds for taxpayers earlier, this proposal is intended to assist businesses with liquidity cash flow so that the businesses were able to sustain themselves, okay? And secondly, usually taxpayers submit VAT returns every 2 months, but this provision permitted vendors to file their returns from the 1st of April to 31st of July, okay? Then the extension of time periods, the proposed amendments are in respect of the rules of the Customs and Excise Act number 91 of 1964, which will change the 2019 period for submission of accounts and carbon tax payments from 31st July to 31st October. Now on these issues that Poppy has covered, Ms. Ntaka, you know that they cover exactly what we have looked at yesterday, last week and today. But is there anyone who wants to raise anything? Nope. Okay, colleagues. Sorry, yes, who's got a question?
I see Mr. Ryder's hand is up, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Ryder, Dennis, yes, go for it.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, and I almost felt sorry for you. You've been doing all the talking yourself, so I thought let me.
Yeah, I know you think I like it, but actually I don't, actually. And you know, the thing is that unfortunately or fortunately, this bill is relatively consensual, or the disagreements have already been sorted in the NA side. There you are. Yes, go for it, please, Dennis.
I think that's the point that I wanted. I think that's the point that I wanted to make, is that the majority of the details of this bill we're in agreement with, we welcome, and I think the Treasury needs to be acknowledged for what they've done. I think that the issue that this doesn't go far enough, and that more interventions are possibly needed going forward. I think been reasonably dealt with by Momo. Now, you said Momo doesn't trust some other people. I think we don't trust Momo. But look, the issue is Momo came back to us and said, look, guys, this is our first stab at it, and this is a response to, initial response to a situation that presented itself that no one's able to quantify at this stage. And please see it as just that, our first stab, and should the need arise, there will be further adjustments or amendments as deemed fit. And I think that's important, and it's something that's certainly worth noting. In addition to that, I think that what he said is that, you know, things are going to change as we go forward. And certainly no one expected, well, we had hoped that it wouldn't be quite so bad, but no one expected a 51% drop in GDP, although, look, that is, it's annualized, and it's probably going to be less than that once we smooth it out over 2 or 3 quarters. But no one expected to see that. So I think that that we're all reasonably happy that this has been the first salvo, and specifically as well, and this is the comment I want to make quite strongly as well, is that there was a comment that these are the blanket adjustments or alleviation mechanisms that are being made. And if there are individual entities that still feel that they need further extensions, they can apply for that. And I think that was quite a strong point that I certainly noted and made me feel a lot more comfortable about the fact that, what we've got here is actually it's a pretty good gesture, and we're most supportive of it. I do think that we're in for a scary ride. I don't know if you've noticed that the COVID figures in places like France, Italy, Spain, and the UK all seem to be showing a second resurgence, which is quite interesting, and I hope that we don't experience the same. But yeah, no one knows where this thing is going to end. We've got, yeah, as I say, a good gesture here from Treasury. We've got good comments from the support staff. I'd like to just emphasize those 2 points of the fact that this is just the first one, and there is opportunity for people to make individualized and circumstantial, based on their own circumstances, applications for further relief. Thank you, Chair.
Well, what I usually ask opposition members to do, obviously I'm a journalist and all that, so, it's a bit easier for me to edit and so on. I don't change the content. So, if you want to send us 2 paragraphs by, what's the time now, at 6:46 p.m. Well, first thing in the morning, send it to Nkululeko and me and Esther. We will include it. Secondly, can I ask Treasury also to put their own paragraph, and then we'll combine what Dennis is saying and what Momo said, and what I think Treasury you say as a whole. Now, the value of that, Dennis, is that although it was said, excuse me, it's important to put it on paper, because these reports are meant to guide us. So when we look at future tax bills, and obviously COVID's going to be here in some form or another for a long time to come, I think. I mean, we don't know, but some or other form. And I don't want to delve into this where COVID-19 is going, but since you've taken it where you have, and pointing to its unpredictability, I'm not going to detain this meeting unduly. I'm no expert. I got an E for maths and science in matric, so I'm the last person to have any credibility. But I do read all these scientists, and I'm very challenged by this thing. I mean, obviously it's fascinating. Well, huge cost to our lives, but it's interesting to sort of like fascinating to understand what's going on and why, and not that we know, but So from what I can gather, Dennis, the other striking thing and disappointing for us down south is that if you take, like, for example, southern parts of the US, right? The theory originally was, very strong heat, India and so on, will kill the virus, that it's really a seasonal flu sort of virus. Winter is when it surfaces, summer is when, it sort of recedes, as normal flus and previous viruses have. Well, Miami, as we all know, or may not know, watching the TV can tell, or Spain for that matter, has very high temperatures in summer. Well, I think most of us know that India is scorchingly hot, I think, in summer for the most parts of the country. And well, this theory that, the virus, the heat kills the virus, has turned out to be questionable. So yes, you're right. Our only hopes that what seems to be one of the many reasons is that maybe the variant or the form, or what's the word? It's mutated. It's less powerful here than in Wuhan and elsewhere in the northern established countries. Countries or not, but hopefully it's there. But you're right, it's unpredictable. I think we should emphasize that point, that some word like transitional, Esther. But look, between if you can have it, let us have it by, let's say, 10 o'clock tomorrow. Even in bullet point, we'll string it together. But you're quite capable of writing it out. And then Yanga and Chris, we can have something. You people are experts. You can give it to us tonight, but latest by 8 o'clock tomorrow. We will put that in. That's useful to say. So we will put it in. Right. And it's not covered in the NA report. So, it's not as if we're repeating what they say. Okay, colleagues, now let me go to my PDF files because we're looking at the bills. Am I right? In Kolileko, there's nothing else right now. We just got to start looking at each bill, right?
Yes, Chair.
Right. So then let's turn to the bills, colleagues. So we've discussed the policy issues. So it's a very easy process now. And obviously on page 1, we're looking at, okay, clause 1. Obviously, the preamble's fine. I read through it. Also, again, I've been reading it in the last 2 hours or so while the House was sitting. So, you know, I went through it line by line. Well, not completely, I must confess, but, you know, most of it. And anyway, you know, the content advisor, the legal advisor will look at it and check if there's anything. It's not really something we need to do, which is consistent with the decisions taken. But let's start with the definition and interpretation. I really see nothing there. But on that, is there anybody who wants to make any comments to 1.1, 1.2 to 4? So 1.1 to 4, running into page 3. Any comments, colleagues? No. Yanga, can you just quickly give us an overview of what's here? Or Chris, whoever. Yeah.
Those are definitions or interpretations of all the terms used in the COVID-19 tax bills. That's what is in clause 1. Chair.
Right.
Thank you.
As I understand it, this is already in the existing legislation, right? Have you tweaked or changed any of these amendments?
Yes, Chair. The only new definition that you have is the Solidarity Fund and
Obviously, yes. I mean, apart from that, we take, but I mean, the income tax obviously remains the same. The COVID-19 relief disaster, you've got to define that is a new thing. Solidarity Fund is a new thing, but sub 3 and sub 4 is consistent with that. So, I mean, there's nothing there apart from those definitions. The rest is the same, right? So let's go to the second clause on the employment tax incentive. Can you take us through you made the changes on 2.1. What's there? Take us to 2.1 up to the end of 2.3. What you've done here?
We have not made any changes. The changes are made in clause 7, the proposed changes. So here it remains the same. Here we are dealing with the monthly remuneration for the ETI, Chair. Thanks.
Yes, yes. Okay, so these are previous years. So there's nothing new there, right? So then section 3, what are the new amendments made here?
After the bill has been tabled, Chair, there are no new amendments that you have made. Those are the things that you have briefed the committee about, Chair, dealing with the national minimum wage for the ETI as well.
Yeah, but what you can do is to help us, because not everybody's read the bill. I mean, a chairperson has to do it. You have no choice because you're chairing. And ultimately, you're responsible, together with the legal advisors and the content advisor for, you know, although the committee is responsible, but the chair has to take, like, you know, some degree of responsibility. So just remind members who may not have had a chance to read it. So let's look at clause 3, just give a quick overview of what's there, because there may be some things. Remember, as often happens, Younger, we agree on a policy issue. When we look at the actual bill and look at a clause, we say, how? But this clause doesn't really reflect what we want. Now, it's very challenging, colleagues, so don't be dismayed, those of you who have just joined Parliament in 2019. It is very hard, ask Eti Formula, to actually deal with tax bills and work it out. But any other bill, it's very easy to tell, because it's an amendment to an amendment to an amendment to an amendment to a bill that originally was tabled, I think, in 1962, right? So it's a very complex thing. But that being said, we must do our job as a committee. So, Younger, Chris, help us, remind us. Now, what's section 3 about quickly? I think, I mean, I know, but just remind us. Yeah.
Clause 3, Chair, is talking about the amount of the wage payable for the ETI and the issue regarding that the national minimum wage should not be tampered with. And then it talks about the 160 hours per month per 2,000 in respect of a month. So it deals with the monthly, with the hours and the monthly rates, sir.
Yeah, okay, fine. And remember, it's easier for me and Eti Formula, you know, because we've been through this since 2014. Let me also put it to you, colleagues, especially those of you new and will be around for a while. I'm obviously speaking to the ANC people. I don't know what's the future of the DA. Let's not discuss that here. We can have another forum for that. But on a more serious note, you see, I want to tell you, colleagues, as important as the tax bills are, they are technically very challenging, very challenging. Us, particularly, we battled and battled. Fortunately for us, we had one or two tax experts from the DA over the years. They changed now and then, but they were actually people who dealt with tax issues. So technically, they were very good. And we were quite frank. There's nothing to hide. I am not trained, nor is Dick a lady. She's a trade unionist and a teacher. I'm trained, by the way, as a sociologist and, well, for what little it's worth, a journalist and so on. I'm not cut out. My activity, like hers was in the unions, mine was in the civics, in the local government's movement. And that's where my passion and heart is, basically. But you are here and you have to do your job and so on. But I'm not a finance person. I'm not a tax expert. The DA helped us a lot. We disagreed on policy issues, but they explained to us what the meaning was of what we were doing in simpler language, not simple, but from the point of view of Parliament. So can I urge that, and DA often has, for historical reasons, technically sort of, well, often, not always, I mean, very good skills. So, on tax, for example. Now, fortunately for us, we had Tandi Tobias Pakolo declared it, and she really specialized for the ANC on tax bills. So she would have got a preponderant say. And Injadu is going to be assuming that role, but it's new to him, and so he has to find his feet too. But having said that, can we move on to 4? Clause 4. Is there anything you want to raise here, Yanga, to alert the members?
Clause 4 deals with the date of employment and the applicability for ETI, sir, which started on 1 October 2013.
That's what it basically deals with, right? Okay, we don't want to add anything, right, to remind members. All right. Then we're dealing with the next clause, 5.
The clause 5 is the ETI formula.
Yes.
For payment of the ETI, that the formula that needs to be used in calculating the ETI.
Right. I must say it's wonderfully easy. So here it is, Mr. Ryder. X represents the amount of the monthly employment tax incentive that must be determined. A represents the amount of 750. B represents the amount number 0.375. C represents the amount of the monthly remuneration of the employee, and D represents the amount of 4,500, or sub 3, now 6,500 or more, an amount of null. So there you are. This is how complex these bills are compared to an ordinary bill. Okay, section 6, but we deal with the political and policy issues. Section 6, Yanga?
Clause 6 deals with the period in which the employer is supposed to submit the return.
Right. Clause 7.
Clause 7 is where we propose the changes after the bill has been tabled. It's dealing with disaster relief organization that get streamlined special tax dispensation for COVID-19 relief funds. So there we changed the effective date. It was supposed to end in July, and we extended it by 2 months to 30 September, Chair. That's where the changes were proposed, Chair, and were made.
Yeah, this is quite a substantial part. Yeah, okay. Then there's clause 8.
Clause 8 deals with the Solidarity Fund, Chair, as the Solidarity Fund is different to other COVID-19 relief funds. And also in this clause, the changes were made to extend to 30 September, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, this is, colleagues, it's quite substantial one. I read this, these sections more carefully. Then clause 9.
The clause 9, you remember in the COVID-19 relief funds, whereby they were saying that they're gonna make loans to employers, but those loans will be treated as remuneration in the hands of the employees and will be paid directly to the employees as remuneration. That is other COVID-19 relief funds. So this clause was making a provision whereby when the COVID-19 relief funds is paying remuneration to those employees, they should be exempted from withholding tax obligation and should not be regarded as employers.
Yeah. Colleagues, if you have any issues, just put your hand up on Kulileko. If they do it through the chat group and are raising their hand device, then you will draw my attention that now. The next one is a temporary exemption. Is there anything you want to raise there? Younger? Excuse me. Younger, anything on clause 10?
Clause 10 is the skills development levy temporary exemption that you've already discussed, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, so clause 11 is straightforward application. Clause 12 is a short title. So colleagues, if I'm correct, unless members discover between now and 6 p.m. tomorrow, and if you do pick up things, it's better you contact me, because then it means I can facilitate things so that before we go to vote, we can settle it, and I can also engage with Younger and a team on the need for any amendments. Remember, if we do make any amendments, then we have to refer it to the NA, and they, as you know, it's a Section 75 bill. They're not obliged to accept or what we say. It's not a 76 bill, as you know. Okay, colleagues, that's done. Then the next bill is the, here we are. Now, let me see. Sorry. Okay. Okay, let me just get this again. Sorry, I'm not very good at using a computer. And there's nothing to do with Zoom. It's my inadequacies, nothing to do with Zoom. Be the same on Teams. Right, now let's go to the Disaster Management Tax Relief Administration Bill, which obviously is just linked to the policy bill we have informally accepted. So the definitions here are lockdown, etc. But take us through it, Younger, on page clause 1.
Chair, this is an administration bill. SARS Franz Tomasek is dealing with it, Chair.
Is he here? Okay, because he hasn't said a word. Oh, there's no need for it. Okay, Franz, go to you, my friend. So obviously the lockdown and all this. Just explain to us what the new ones are, qualifying taxpayer, etc. But where you're not making an amendment, you don't have to tell us what's already done in the original act, okay? Or the act as we got to it. Over to you, Franz. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Chair. So very briefly, as you correctly stated, the definitions cover who qualifies. So those are the key issues here. That's where a great deal of the debate took place previously, and that debate has resulted in the 100 million caps and the other aspects that we've discussed already.
And the lockdown is merely referring to what was done in regulations as provided for the Disaster Management Act. Guess who was chairing the committee at the time, Franz? That was thousands of years ago. Did I ever know I'll still be here this year? Or that we'll have COVID? I suppose the DA will attack me and say, you see these useless people, they never foresaw COVID, right? And this stupid chair, he's been around so long, he's got such a big mouth, but when he was there in the committee, processing the disaster management bill as it was then, he never saw what was going to happen 18 years later, Dikelele. How silly. Okay, I know what you're going to say, Mr. Jatoya and Mr. Ryder, and I'm happy to be your spokespeople to save us time. Franz, I know you don't agree with them. As an official who's independent and objective, Franz, you don't agree with them. I know that. Okay, so the Solidarity Fund is obviously new, colleagues. What else would it be? Did anybody think of a Solidarity Fund in 2012? No, not the stupid chairperson that was there then, whoever that was. Okay, the next one, Franz, over to you.
So clause 2 now deals with the deferral of employees tax. That's the 35% that employers are permitted to defer. This is where there has been a change in that an additional month was added onto the period of deferral.
Okay, colleagues, what do you say? Any comments here? We've agreed to it. I mean, unless there's something new, can we let Franz pass on? Obviously, you'll butt in or interject. Not a butt in or interject. You can just say what you want to say. Okay, deferral of the provisional tax. Over to you, Franz.
Thank you, Chair. So clauses 3 and 4 go together. So both of these deal with the deferral of your provisional tax that's known in the micro business space, your interim payments. And that's why there are 2 clauses, because the terminology is a little different and the way it's approached are a little different. So that's what's happening in those 2 clauses.
Okay, any comments? I take it there aren't. Well, if there are, people will raise their voices through the audio. Deferral of interim payments. Okay, here too, it's straightforward, but go for it, Franz. You speak on the, well,
All right. So as I say, clause 4 is then just the matching provision for micro businesses. Those are businesses with a turnover of up to $1 million. They get a simplified tax system. So just as the small to medium-sized businesses get a deferral of 35% of their provisional tax, so the micro businesses get a deferral of 35% of their interim payments.
of course. Okay. Then we're going to clause 5.
So clause 5 is, it matches what's happening in the money bill. So the money bill talks to the donations you can deduct over the course of a tax year. What this clause deals with is the employer being able to take the donations that are being done through the payroll system into account when calculating how much employees tax you need to pay.
Yeah, of course. And the extension of time period 7, any comments? Any explanation? Just quick overview, yeah.
So, all right, so 6, Chair, the change in the value-added tax category.
Ah, yes, I jumped that, sorry. Okay.
So that's the clause that permits the monthly filing for the people who would normally file every 2 months. It's not compulsory, but if you're a vendor who's in a situation where you're expecting a refund, obviously you'd like that refund quicker, and so you'll come in monthly as opposed to every 2 months.
We just looked at that policy-wise, yeah. Then 7.
Clause 7, this is the extension of various time periods for the period of the hard lockdown. Obviously, if we expected you to come into a SARS office for an interview, that wasn't going to be possible. So there's an extension of the time period, and that then takes place for both the tax and the customs aspects.
Okay, Franz, can I ask a practical question? At the moment, right, on average, with lockdown 2 restrictions, what percentage of the SARS officials or staff, rather, as a whole, are physically at work? What percentage?
I don't have accurate numbers on that. Where we have staff at work, that would typically be the people who are client facing.
Yes.
Because we do still permit a limited number of appointments to go into offices on an, as I sort of just said, on an appointment basis. What we've done generally is to try and give people technological tools so that they can work from home. So, for example, our call center operators, a large number of them are in fact working from home using voice over IP, so that the phone calls are in fact being made over the SARS network, which they then also being given access to on a carefully managed basis, so that they can make the phone calls and not have to come into the office. But I can't give you a percentage offhand. We can get that information for you.
No. Well, it's just to get a sense of, you know, obviously, as Dennis and others say, it's unpredictable, right? And you don't want to sort of move people from remote working into physical work, and then you move them back to remote, and so on. It can be disruptive and unproductive and even undermine, you know, efficiency. So I'm not saying people should rush to work. I mean, to start with, we as MPs are not rushing. We have this hybrid model on the one side, and in fact, fully virtual on our side. But the question I want to put to you is, not a question, I just want to make this observation, members. I have been engaging with 2 DGs around constituency matters, and both of them told me in the recent period that on average, 1/3 of the staff is meant to come in, and it rotates. So if you are an official in, say, a particular department, you will go into the first week of a month, and then on the first day of week 4, well, not the first day, but the first working day, right? So on average, it's 1/3, but for various reasons, people are battling the DGs to ensure that they can get 1/3. But maybe things have improved, because this is something that I got to establish about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think we're still in level 3. Maybe things have improved. But the reason obviously is all of us are concerned, whichever party we come from, France, Treasury, that, you know, recently the minister and/or the commissioner are saying that even the 304.1 billion that it's estimated shortfall you will have as SARS, that we will have as a country, is probably an underestimate. So I know it's difficult to get the money, but perhaps it may be fair to say, and in a way unfair to say, that officials and staff in SARS are like under more pressure than anybody else, because if the revenue doesn't come, we're in big trouble. And maybe you'll argue that your IT and technology advances, which, if I'm correct, led the world in some respects, France, some years ago, e-filing and all. I mean, we were so maybe on the one hand, you're under enormous pressure, but on the other hand, because you're so advanced technologically, you're under less pressure. It's not so much you have to be physically in and have client interface. The more you move towards use of cell phones or whatever to secure revenue and answer questions, let alone computers, maybe your remote working is more productive and effective because you're so advanced compared to other institutions, technologically. Do you think that's a reasonable thing to say?
So, Chair, I mean, I hesitate to blow SARS's trumpet too hard here.
You're not blowing the trumpet. I am. I'm sure the MPs that have been here for a while, and so are others who joined us, but who know it. It's something the whole country can be proud of, right? I mean, it's not something that's party political. Am I not right in saying, until 2014, I wasn't so preoccupied with SARS, obviously. I mean, I just pay my taxes. What else do I need to do with SARS? Little as I know, I'll end up in this portfolio. So what I'm saying is, I mean, I read that in Business Day and Financial Mail and other papers. It's not from an ANC journal. So, it's an empirical thing. So, is it not true that we are very advanced?
So, Chair, you're quite correct. I mean, if you go back a few years, SARS was winning international awards for some of the products that we put together. Then there was an unfortunate period where there was a degree of stagnation. We're obviously working very hard to bring things up to speed, which has been sort of had even more focus as a result of the changes we need to make to cope with COVID-19. So there's been a massive drive to enable our teams to work from home through technology. And as I say, that has gone right from the call center staff, where we've equipped them with voice over IP facilities so they can actually make and receive calls from home using their computers. I mean, people in my unit, for example, spend quite a good period of time at home because you can do a lot of your work through a VPN, virtual private network access through to the office. Some of the changes we've made this year around auto assessment, which had been in the works for a while. We had a pilot last year. This year it becomes even more important because it allows people to essentially just look at what SARS has told them. This is the information we have for you. If you're happy with it, accept. And that into the details of e-filing, you're happy, you can move on. If you're not happy, then you go into what we call the edit mode, or the sort of normal return mode, and then you can electronically file your returns. And we've put a lot of effort into simplifying our e-filing system, and especially our Mobi app for people who want to do it using their mobile phones. So we've put a lot of effort into trying to be as efficient as we can possibly be under the circumstances, using the technological tools that we have available to us. And then where it is essential, so again, we come back to those client-facing staff, our staff at the borders, because you still need people to check the goods going in and out of the country. There we make arrangements for rotation, for PPE to be issued if required, so that they can be effective in the roles where they have to be physically present.
Yeah, okay, fine. Colleagues, it's not irrelevant to what we're discussing, because we're dealing with tax bills related to COVID. We're dealing with revenue as a whole related to COVID. And obviously, one of the aspects is how efficiently is SARS able to function in this context. So it's not directly relevant to amending the bill, but we might, Esther and colleagues, want to put something in our report in regard to that we need to encourage SARS to restore its world ranking or whatever. I don't know, it sounds crude to say that, but you know what I'm trying to say, Esther. We'll draft something. You send me a text and we'll work on it. to recommend to SARS that they do everything possible, as if they're not. I think they are, to actually, you know, function as efficiently as they can, and increasingly make IT accessible to the lower income strata and so on. We'll find the wording, Esther, but if colleagues want to add, listen, it's not our job, it's our committee report. It's not Esther and my job alone. Nowhere does it say that in the rules. So colleagues, if you got any proposals, please send it all to us by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thanks. Okay, then we move to the next. Yeah, sorry. Somebody wants to speak. Is that Dennis?
That's Dennis, yeah.
Yeah, Dennis.
Thank you very much. And perhaps before I make my statement, I should add a disclaimer that SARS is currently busy auditing me. So
so you're not sucking up to them so that you get a good audit. Okay, right. We get it. Yeah.
But no, look, I think that SARS is to be commended on their response, and I think that I wasn't aware that the auto assessment had been something that had been brought in before, but I thought that as an innovation to deal with the COVID-19 situation, it was excellent, and I think that you may find a lot of resistance from some accounting professionals.
Yeah.
But I think for the majority of the man in the street who's finding a simple, easy way to tick that box of saying my tax is done, finding a happy meeting that he's happy with, that SARS is happy with, I think it's a fantastic innovation. So I just particularly wanted to add my voice to that. And so I thought that that's certainly a way of preventing people from having to go in, from having to deal with their accountants, having to go through all of these processes.
Yeah.
That's particularly good.
Well, thanks for that, Dennis. If you want to write a few lines on that, again, please do. It's fun. Let's put it in. We need to encourage, you know, SARS, and we need to boost the morale of their staff. So, Frans, you get the drift, yeah? It's a cross-party political line. We really welcome what you've done. We know you need to do more. We hope you will, and we think you will. Okay, let's move on, Esther. We will also do something and string it all together. Look, the next one, if I'm right, Frans, we've come to short title and a commencement. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair. That then brings you to the end of the bill.
Yeah, excuse me. Okay, so we're done, colleagues. Now, excuse me. Let me deal with process issues, right? What we're going to do is, Esther, I'm not going to kill you. I know it's 7:17 p.m. and your family responsibilities and so on. Now, you know, what I suggest is you get me a draft by 10 o'clock tomorrow, and then as members submit things, we can insert it. But the aim would be, look, I'm in the NCOP sitting. It's a virtual sitting. And in fact, in the House, as colleagues know, many of us, we function multitask. I mean, we can do it because we've been on for so long. So I will use my computer as well, obviously, and work on it. And then hopefully, colleagues, will get it out to you by latest 3 p.m. But Esther, let's hope for 2 p.m. Then remember that tomorrow we've got a 3-hour meeting. So we've got plenty of time, but I cannot imagine, you know, given what's happened today, and we're almost finished at 7:18, and you're pleased to know the chairperson is not going to detain you unduly because he wants to blabber on. But, you know, I don't think tomorrow's meeting is going to last more than half an hour to an hour. So the sooner we get it to them, Esther, the better. And if we don't, well, you know, a bit later, but it's not going to be like a long report. So even if members just look at it while we're in the committee, I can't imagine sitting for more than half an hour to 45 minutes, but let's see how it goes. Anyone want to say anything before I draw the meeting to a close?
Okay. Sorry, we released France.
Sorry,
we released France a little bit too early for my liking. I just wanted to ask, I know that there were some proposals made with regard to access to retirement funds and retirement savings, etc.
Yeah.
To facilitate people, you know, who have substantial savings but who don't have any current liquidity or cash flow, to access that. I know that they haven't been agreed to. Is it something that's being considered still? Is it something that would be considered going forward? If we can just get an indication for that. Please.
Yeah, that's a good point. that was raised. It's been raised persistently by Dion George and others. And I won't speak for Treasury. They'll come in. If anybody else wants to raise any outstanding issue, including issues that arose on the NA side, but have fallen away since. Any points, any questions apart from the one raised by Dennis Ryder? But somebody else piped in. I don't know who was it. Did they want to raise anything? Is anybody else on the raise hand facility there that who wants to raise anything?
No, what?
All right, fine. Yeah. Jadu?
Yeah, no, Chair, I think their consensus, I think we don't even have to vote tomorrow because the common understanding as to the three W's, the why and the what and who, in terms of the tax relief bills. So I'm convinced that we have got a common understanding. Thank you, Chair.
Order.
Yeah, but obviously, Njadu, that's correct. But we have to formally vote in terms of the rules, as you know. So when I mean vote, I don't mean like an endless debate. The report will be tabled, the two reports, and then we will then put the bills as well, and then vote on them. So I really don't think in Njadu it will take very long. Over then to Mr. Tomasek and Ms. Younger and Chris, who's going to respond?
Which aspect?
Younger?
Chair, I'm here. I see nobody's responding. Do you want me to respond? Hello.
Yeah, now that you're here. Welcome,
Sure.
Momo. We did note that you didn't trust Younger and then when you had to be here, and therefore I'm teasing you, Momo. We did note that you couldn't make it. You were busy with the minister, but yeah, respond, please.
So is this a question on the loans against the retirement funds?
Yeah, I know what you're going to say. You've said it before. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no. We said we're only dealing here with all the COVID measures. That there were suggestions that were made that fell outside it, and some of those we'll be considering whether we have a second round of TLAB measures where we'll make those announcements. Because remember, the timing for some of those recommendations that came relate to the entire financial year. So are not like the travel stuff is not needed now for the COVID bill, but could be dealt with in the TLAB. And
Yeah.
we'll come back to you on the TLAB on those issues.
Okay. But then what you could do is just give us a paragraph on that. We'll look at it so that we insert it there. And so that it's a basis on which we look at the TLAB, but also on the specific issues that Dion raises now, right? What is your response? That, people who don't have access, who've lost their jobs and so on, how do we find that balance? I know it comes up all the time between accessing some of your money and on the other hand, having something future to rely on and not expend everything now.
Chair, we said two things. We firstly said that, some of those proposals need to be motivated.
Right.
And that honorable members must submit a motivation for those measures that they were advocating.
Yeah.
And we have received some from members. If I remember, I see one from someone. I'm just trying to remember. But I mean, we've not decided on the measures to take in the TLAB yet.
Right.
But, the closing date was the end of the month, August.
Yeah.
And so, we're just processing. But at the same time, we are being proactive just generally on all these measures. And in fact, we've had meetings even within NEDLAC,
Yes.
where we're looking at some of those measures. We haven't come to a final decision because part of it is you got to watch how you do this thing. Otherwise, there could be a run on
Yes, yes.
all retirement funds.
Yeah.
Secondly, whether even administratively it's possible.
Yeah.
Thirdly, some of it requires changes, not necessarily only to these tax bills, but it's other legislation. So, for example, when COSATU approached us for a very limited set of things, they
Yes.
assume that the Disaster Management Act can trump current legislation.
Yes.
And our view was where there is specific legislation, the Disaster Management Act can't trump that.
Yes.
Unless it's directly related to the disaster, I guess. So, we are looking at a range of those proposals, and we will respond and say why we don't agree to some of those that have been raised, or that we agree to it as we normally do. But to the extent that we've been already convinced, we will put out pretty soon a second round of possible TLAB measures to incorporate into the bill. So in
Fine.
other words, all the urgent measures have been dealt with in this COVID bill.
Yes.
But if you want to borrow against your pension fund, that's not really a tax issue. It's likely to be other laws anyway.
Okay, you know what, Momo, to save us time on this, the NA might be interested to have it on paper. Can't you just summarize in a few lines the issues here so we can insert it into, which guides us, so we don't have the discussion.
But Chair, we don't want to preempt what people are saying. You see, there's too many. Well, all I'm saying is the process issues. We're saying that we'll deal with it in detail when we do the TLAB.
That's right. So all I'm saying to you is now, I'm not asking you to put your whole debate down, just the issue, and mention that it's not really a tax issue because it keeps coming up, right? Presumably Dion George has written to you, but anyway, before we tie this up, for our report, we just want you to put a few lines in so that it guides us and we don't keep raising the question. So it's not as if you're going to put down everything you've said, because rightly you're not going to preempt what people want to say, and you need to apply your mind to whatever they do in fact say. So over to you, Dennis. You wanted to raise something according to Nkululeko here. Dennis, are you there?
Yeah. No, we're still on the last one, Chair. But I think just to put Mama's mind at rest, a general response will be more than adequate. Just, it doesn't have to be specific.
Yeah. Just so that, yeah. So at least we've covered the issue. You see, the other thing is, Momo, we can't just write a report that like completely echoes what the National Assembly has said. And, it doesn't appear in their report. We're not saying you should do anything that's not germane to these two bills. We're simply saying the issue does come up, and deal with it in a few lines, 4 or 5 lines. That's all, not a full answer.
No problem, Channel.
Good. All right. And then Dennis, if you want to say anything, you can send 2 or 3 lines too. We'll just merge them, and it will at least set the basis for us to know where we stop now, and we won't pick up on what we've covered already, but from where we've stopped. Now, if I'm correct, is there anybody else from Treasury or France? Do you want to say anything? This is really a policy issue. It's not a SARS issue. So I don't know. Does anybody else from your team want to say anything? No. I don't hear any whimper of Kuleko. Okay, fine. From our side, members of Parliament, anybody? Yeah.
Yes, I've got Dr. Dumisani chances.
Yes, Dumisani, my friend, how are you? Come in,
fine,
please.
Chairperson. How are you?
Good.
Can you hear me?
I'm very well. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think now that Momo has, there was a point. I wanted to raise a point about the. It's not related to the disaster as per se, but I think, as Momo was saying, that they're expecting more suggestions in terms of what other measures could be considered. One of the points that I wanted to raise last week during the NAB, which I couldn't raise, was the issue around the excessive profits. Because what I've realized over the times during the COVID, there has certainly been some of the sectors, some of the industries that have certainly benefited quite significantly from the COVID-19, which certainly didn't earn that profit, were just given to them by the fact of having the COVID and the lockdown. When you look at some of the tech industry and those who had made so excessive profit. So I mean, the point I wanted to suggest to the committee members that they could suggest to Treasury, it's whether are they going to consider, whether additional tax measures to those industry or companies who would have obviously earned excessive profits as a result of the COVID, as a way of trying to make up for lost revenue. Of course, that's a very abstract point, but I think within globally there has been discussion in terms of how do governments make up for lost revenue in this regard. Of course, I'm saying it's not related to disaster bills, but I think it's a broader issue which could be a policy matter. Thank you, Chairperson, and all members.
Yeah, although it's related to disaster because it's the conditions of the COVID that have stimulated their profits. Presumably you're referring to like ICT people and the funeral industry and so on. I'm not sure that I got you right, but maybe that's what you're talking about. Anyway, over to you, Momo, and your team.
Chair.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course. Well, I can, and I'm sure others can't.
No, I don't think there's anything more for us to add. I mean, I think the point that Dumisani is making, I would invite him to put a specific proposal to us. I mean, it's very hard to deal with others. I mean, the tax instrument is blunt to try and deal with, the other mischiefs and so on. So the tax system can be difficult. And so I'm not sure how he proposes that be done. I mean, we all want to act on those things, but I'm not sure the tax system is the right way to do it.
Okay, any other comments? Nope. In Kulileko, nobody, right?
Nope, right, Chair.
Sunny, you can engage offline with Treasury, and then you can come back to us at some stage, and send us an email or whatever. And if you want, you can always speak to me, obviously, and Esther and Poppy and so on. So having said that, can I draw the meeting to a close unless there's something else in Kulileko? Is there anything we left out?
Thank you, Chairperson.
Right, so we're done. Okay, right, good. So then thank you all. We shall see you at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Everybody keep well.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.